Hello, my goons and gals, laden across the great lands and the lovers of two wheels. I want to welcome you to today's video where I will be talking about the maintenance misconceptions surrounding the ever so popular and, dare I say, sexy Honda CRF 450 RL and L models. And I also want to talk to you about the true cost of ownership with this bike. Now, before I get started, I do want to talk to you about the consequences of actually not subscribing to this channel. I mean, come on. You look at me and you say, hey, he seems like a nice guy. That's good enough as it is. Also, we're both lovers of two wheels. We could just sit around all day and talk back and forth about bikes. Wouldn't that be great? But the only way we can do this is if you subscribe. So do it now. So let us begin with the maintenance misconceptions surrounding the beautiful CRF 450 RL and L models. And I'll begin by addressing the elephant in the room, which is what puts most people off from buying this bike in the first place. And I understand because it almost put me off from buying this bike. And that is the ridiculous recommended maintenance that Honda wants you to do to this thing. They're saying that you need to change the oil every 600 miles, which is like 960 kilometers. That's insane. And then every third oil change, which is like 1,800 miles, they want you to do a valve check. That's insane too. So like when you first read that, you're like, oh, hell no. Ain't no way I'm going to be working on my bike all that much. You feel like you're going to be changing your oil every week. Now, I want to go a couple of different ways and talk to you about this. Before I bought this bike, I spoke specifically, personally, to 6 different CRF 450 owners of this type of bike, from 2018 model all the way to 2021. Not a single one of those riders were changing their oil every 600 miles. They were doing at least 1,000, some 1,500. That's a much different schedule than the 600. Now, these bikes had 5,000 miles, and one of them had 12,000 miles, and they never had a problem with these bikes. So they weren't following that 600-mile schedule. They were doing the valve checks every 5,000 miles and never had a problem with it. So I guess we can always go back and say, look, it's a Honda. Hondas don't break. It's probably one of the most durable, most reliable motorcycles ever built. I don't think Honda could make a crappy motorcycle. But I don't think that's necessary for you to change the oil every 600 miles, especially if you're going to be using a $20 a quart premium oil. That just seems ridiculous that you would have to do it that way. Again, we could debate on politics why Honda puts that in there. It could be for EPA, it could be emissions. It could be a lot of different political reasons. We don't have time for that. So number one, I'm going to say that you don't even need to mess with that. You can change it easily every 1,000 to 1,500 miles. I've spoke to tons of people in forums that are doing that. Nobody's ever had a problem. You can go around YouTube and you're going to see, my Honda broke down, my Honda broke down. You're not going to find those videos because it doesn't. Now, on that note, I can't tell you that's what you're going to do. Let's say you're one of those ones that really want to follow that maintenance schedule, and I get that. I understand it. For warranty purposes, for whatever reason, you want to abide by the rule and you want to be perfect with your bike and do it. When you look at this bike, changing that every 600 miles still is not that big of a deal. First of all, let's talk about the job. It takes roughly 10 minutes, and most of that time is trying to get the plastic plate off. 5 of that's getting this plate off so you can get the screw up from underneath and drain the oil and take the filter out from the other side. If you got a skid plate that had the hole in it already, you could do this even less. But let's just say it's a 10-minute job that you're doing to this bike. That's not that long. I would say that even with a premium oil and a filter, the top that you're going to be spending is about $30. So cost-wise, it's not that much money, and I'll go into that here in just a second. And definitely time-wise, it's not. Now, the segue into this is I want to talk about what's the competitors to this bike, because this is what steered me into buying this bike in the first place. And I think you have 2 different motorcycles in the dual sport world. This is not official, I'm just coming up with it. And then I'm going to talk about you ADV riders. And that is, you have aggressive enduro dual sports. And these are bikes that are cut from the origins of their siblings, their racing siblings, like this bike. This is a Honda CRF 450R race bike with a detuned motor and a couple other things to make it street legal. You also have the KTM 500 EXC, I think it is, the Husqvarna 501, Gas makes one, and then you have the Yamaha WR 450F. Now that one, I don't believe is street legal in all 50 states. This one is, and that makes a big difference, especially if you intend to ride on the street, which is the only reason you really want to look at this bike is because you do want to ride on the street. But let's talk about those aggressive enduros. What those bikes are really full-on dirt bike trail bikes with a plate. So they're giving you the bare minimum legality to get you from your door to the trail, and then you can go all hell out when you get to the trail and be aggressive as you want. All of those bikes, if you look at the maintenance schedule with the KTM 500, the Husqvarna 501, the Yamaha WR450, they're all recommending routine oil changes about 600 miles. Now, for you guys out there that's done racing and track days, you're changing your oil that much anyway. You're constantly maintaining the bike. You're constantly checking your valves after every so many races. So if you're coming from that group of rider, you're not going to be really put off by that. That's the maintenance that you're doing anyway. And again, it's not that much time, and I'll go into that a little bit deeper. Remember, I took some notes. I want to talk about the other group, which is, let's say, the DRZ 400, the KLR 650 rider, or maybe the smaller version of, not the smaller version of this, but Honda makes a CRF 300 and the 300 Rally. It's much smaller dual sports that don't require that much maintenance. Like, I think you can run a DRZ 400 for the rest of your life on the same oil. Normally what people will do, or riders will do, is they'll change their oil roughly, let's say 3,000 miles. Same way if you owned an adventure bike. Regardless of what the manual says, I know some of them say 7,000 miles oil changes. You're probably gonna do that at 3,000 miles. So I'm going to try to run through this math. I'll put it up here on the screen for you so I don't mess it up, and I hope I don't kind of jumble up these numbers. But if you take a look at it, this bike, let's say you put 10,000 miles on your motorcycle. In 10,000 miles, a DRZ 400, a KLR 650, you're trading it every 3,500 miles. You're going to need about 4 oil changes within that 10,000 miles. So you're looking at 4 oil changes on either an adventure bike, any bike you buy. I'm just going to say 4 oil changes if you push them, because thinking that you're going to change it between 3,000, 3,500 miles, 4 oil changes. And let's say those oil changes take you 30 bucks, right? So you're looking at, what, $120 that you're going to spend over a course of 10,000 miles on it. At first, this one sounds ridiculous, because if you follow the maintenance schedule note for note, you would change it 16 times throughout that 10,000 miles. So I came up with this, that you would, at $3, excuse me, actually 3 per 10K, you would have $90 wrapped up in oil changes on the DRZs, KLRs, or an adventure bikes. Here, with 16 oil changes at 30 bucks each average, I'm just averaging, by the way, guys, you can actually do it for less than that, would be $480. So over 10,000 miles, to put this into perspective, if you haven't figured it out, so I don't mess you up with my math, this is about $390 more of ownership cost if you change the oil religiously every 600 miles. So then you would have to weigh, which is what I did, is this bike worth $390 more than, let's say, a KLR 650, a DRZ 400, or the 300 Rally, the smaller versions of bikes? To me, it was. Maybe to you, it is not. Now, the valve clearances are a little bit different. Those bikes can go up to 10,000 miles. But then again, that job is a little bit, I don't find it to be that hard. But if you are going to buy a bike like this, you have to have some maintenance skills to some degree. So when you look at this maintenance schedule, if you're already somebody who's racing, let's talk about 3 different groups of people that would migrate to the CR. If you're a former racer or track day rider who's backing off of that, wants to do some trail riding with the kids, wants to get out from the house and just ride to the nearest trail, you're already working on your bike. If you're a racer, you've done work on your bike a lot. You're not going to work on this nearly as much as you would a race bike. You're always fixing a race bike. Trust me, I raced for years, and you guys out there that did race, you know, you actually spend more time working on them than you do riding them. And that's just the way it is, because you have crashes and everything else in between. You're not even going to worry about this at all. If you're coming from the DRZ 400, KLR 650, it is going to be a little bit more maintenance that you're going to have to do to the bike. But you're going to have to weigh what this bike is versus what you're riding. So if you're going to ask me, a DRZ 450, a KLR 650, while they're nice motorcycles, they're still strutting around basically on 25-year-old chassis and componentry in a lot of cases. The fit and finish on this motorcycle, the upside potential, because a lot of people ask, should I get a DRZ 400 or this? To me, it was worth the extra money because the potential and the upside possibility of what you can do with this bike is far beyond what you'll ever be able to do with the KLR 650 or the DRZ 400. I mean, if you want to jump a 200-foot gap and pancake whip it, this bike can do it. You can get it to this. The upside potential of what this bike could be is far more than what a DRZ or a KLR or the 300 Rally could be. But you have to make that decision. Do you want to sacrifice the performance versus the money? Now, when it comes to reliability, when it comes to Honda, I don't think you're going to have a reliability problem whatsoever. You're just going to have to do the maintenance more often. And again, do you want to do it or do you not want to do it? To me, the money was worth $390 over 10,000 miles. And I've worked on bikes before, so it's not a problem. Now, the other group of people that come into this is the adventure rider, which is where I spent a lot of my time, and I still have my Tiger 800, where you're looking at maybe converting this into an adventure bike and you're moving it out of, I don't want to pick up my heavy 550-pound behemoth motorcycle off the dirt anymore. Now, I haven't done anything to my Tiger. It's 20,000 miles on it. I've changed the oil 5,000 miles. I mean, I haven't been very... and I talked about this in my Tiger video. Guys, I love Tigers. You got a Triumph Tiger, you want to buy a Triumph. Bulletproof motors. I got 20K miles on that thing, running that thing to hell. I've never, I just checked the valves 2 times on it, and then I changed the oil like every 5,000 miles. Still runs like a charm. So I didn't put anything into that bike either, but the maintenance here is easier because it's a single cylinder. You have a lot less body work for those adventure riders out there, so it's easy to get into this engine and easy to work on it, so it doesn't take you very long to do that. So kind of reviewing this video, the maintenance on this bike isn't that bad for what it is. And I think you first have to understand what this is. There's not a lot of bikes out there that have the potential upside performance of this bike. The componentry, certainly, like the suspension components, you compare this to the 300 Rally, there's no comparison to the suspension here. There's no comparison to the quality of the frame here. This is a whole nother level of a motorcycle. Like, this thing can handle being dropped from a 20-story building. So the thing is, guys, you have to decide what do you want. At first, I was put off about this maintenance schedule too. And in the end, though, when I compared it to what's available, it's hard to really find a bike like this. I mean, if you go with the KTMs and the 501, the argument could be made that, well, that's a KTM. Is it going to be as bulletproof as a Honda? It's more fast, it's more aggressive, but it's also more requirement of your riding ability. You got to be more aggressive with that, which that's okay. I'm cool with that. But I think the big thing is the buzziness on the freeway. Honda did a lot of great things with this bike, and in order to get it to be street legal, they had to really detune the motor, which we all know how to fix that. There's ways around it, and that's what makes it so special. You have like the foam-injected swing arm. You have all these side panels to really kind of get rid of that vibration, and that's what you're going to find when you get on this bike and ride down the highway. It is super smooth for a single-cylinder dual sport. So when you look back at it, again, that's what I think is the maintenance misconception here, is that it's not as much work as you might think that it is. It's definitely not as expensive as you probably think it is. But then when you really compare it to what else is out there, like if you're looking at those other dual sports that don't require that, or adventure bikes, if you're somebody that really likes off-road, you will never reach your fullest potential or never be able to really extend your abilities on a DRZ 400 like you can this. This is just a whole different level of motorcycle. And if you're going to get a whole level of motorcycle that's higher, a higher performance, a more dedicated bike, one with tons of upside potential, well, you're going to have to pay for that. So anyway, goons and gals, I hope this video made some kind of sense. I'll tell you what, I'm sure I left a lot of things out while I was ranting there towards the end, but go ahead and put it down in the description box. Let me know what you think of your bike. Do you have the KLR 650? Do you have the DRZ 400? Do you have the WR? Do you have the 450X model of this? Let me know what you got going on out there. Thanks for your support. Thanks for watching this video. Thanks for liking it if you did. And until the next one, this was just my opinion. Could be wrong.